Welcome to our Insight webinar. Thanks for your time. And my name is Adam Kurtz, and I've been with Sylvan over 20 years. And as you can see today, we are going to discuss some stratum calculations and basically some calculations that could potentially cause the view to hang or run for some time. So we want to talk about stratum calcs and runaway views. So today's agenda, again, I'm Adam Kurtz. Welcome. We want to talk about those calculations, but we'll take a quick review just to make sure that you're comfortable with using viewer and calculations. And then we'll talk about some best practices and some examples of what you can do to avoid or prevent views from processing too long. And then what happens when they do process too long. You've got some viewer administrators that can actually do some things about that, and they could potentially, well, first of all, the user could actually cancel the view. So if you're running the latest viewer code, you could actually cancel the view, or the administrator can use a new tool called View Monitor. And then we'll go into a demo, and we'll take any questions. So let's get started. So like I said, we'll be talking about a review today in terms of what the calculations, are and how to get to it. Of course, I'll cover some of that in the demo, but here is the calculation expression builder. And as you can see, there have been some enhancements done to this so that it's easier, it's more streamlined to create these calculations. So what are we looking at here? Well, you've got the expression area available to you. You've got several areas here that provide some information from the view. So if we look on the left side here, where this area, this red highlighted area, where I can see these folders, and each one of these folders basically contain components within the view. So I've got access to my hierarchies, my measure items, some MDX functions that I can use within my calculation, and then also some Stratum viewer functions that you could use within your calculations as well. The functions typically help you calculate things quicker, more efficient. They might have some mathematical functions that you want to use, like averaging, summing, some of the more basic ones that you can use. We'll talk about counts today and some ranking functions that could potentially get you into trouble. So this is the expression. Now, as you can see, that's a pretty important area. You can expand those folders and get access to those different components that you want to use within your calculation. The expression area itself really hasn't changed much. I mean, it's a free form area that you can go in and type your expression, etc. But you can also, it's also savvy to what you select over here on the left frame menu. So it corresponds with what you drag or drop or maybe click on to select a specific component of the view. So that's where your expression is going to be built. And then once you're done kind of building it, some enhancements have been made so that you can actually provide a caption expression and format the data right here within the same menu. Before certain versions prior to 7.0, you would have to actually go back in to the properties of the calculation and do these things. And it was just, kind of a hassle. So now you can actually go in, create the calculation, and then go ahead and clean the data up with the format of choice, and then give your calculation a good header. And that's free form text as well. You can actually just go in and type your header. So it's really nice. It's really easy. It's much easier than before, which is, the whole concept of having a later version of the product. Oops, jumping ahead here. So here's another example of what I was talking about, where I can actually expand out my hierarchies. And in this case, I can use some brand members within my calculation. So here, I've selected a few brands, and I'm using that sum function to basically bring those brands together and then sum against my actual sales measure. So I created this actually by typing again, basically, but you could use, there's a sum function available and I can show you how to access that. But as you can see, I could sum together brands, and in this case, I've got what they call a set, which is more than just one member. Here I've got two members of the brand level and brand, let's see, brand 5 and brand 9. And I know those are farm fresh and farm crisp brands. So if we were to take a look at this calculation, it would look like this. So here at the division level, even though I'm not at the brand level per se, I can actually see those two brand sales at an aggregate level. In this case, I'm looking at division, and I've got my farm fresh and my farm crisp brand sales. It's kind of segmented out there. Maybe they're new brands, and I want to keep an eye on specifically those brands as I drill to other levels. But at a summary level, I have a good feel for, out of all the sales that I have here on the left-hand side, these are could be my top brands. Like I said, could be new brands. However you want to segment your products, you have the ability to do so by using these types of calculations. So as you can see, it's pretty powerful. You can kind of think outside the box a little bit in terms of how to calculate the data. And it really kind of basically lends itself pretty nicely to the ability to create these types of calculations to keep an eye on certain types of brands in this instance. Here we can see some of the best practices you might want to follow. Perhaps there might be a pickup field or what we call an attribute relationship in the world of viewer, or an attribute. Typically at the product level, you might have something like current list price or some sort of pricing where you could extend it against your sales units if you want to, or maybe you just want to display it. So now we're talking about using a calculation to maybe display or calculate against a pickup field or an attribute field. In this case, as you can see in my screen, I've highlighted how you can access that pickup field or attribute by expanding out my level of product here. I can see that I now have access to the product level because it's within my view. And then also, you want to make sure that you add in the attribute before you come to your expression window. Otherwise, you're not gonna see it here. So in this case, I've already added in current list price, and I can see that now I can use that within my calculation. So within my expression area, as you can see, I'm using a value function, or val, to actually change that function into a numeric value. I don't necessarily have to do that here, but it's just a habit that I use normally because I typically use these to calculate against some measures. Right now, I'm just showing it by using the val function and basically showing a pickup field. So as is, if I were to go ahead and click OK to this calculation, I would get this. So not ideal. Basically what it's doing here is it's retrieving all the pickup fields for all my products. You know, it's getting the current list price for everything, regardless of whether it has any transaction behind it or not. So you might want that. You might want to, in this case, if you want a product list of all your items in your master file, or items that are both selling, transacting, or not, this might be something you want. Normally it would be something you'd probably want to filter these empty rows out, only because there might be a bunch of non-active items and you don't care to see them. Not to mention they have zero in the list price field, so I can see that there's basically $0. There's no data in that field for some of these items. So as you can see, I've retrieved about 165 total rows there by using this calculation. Let's see if we can clean this up and maybe get it to run better. You could run into trouble here. If you do this, I'm using a demo database. In your world, you probably have 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 items. Trust me, this would grind for a while if you did something like this, potentially. Or if you did something like this against your ship to, perhaps you want to show something at the ship to level, or God forbid, invoice. So this thing would grind quite a bit. How do we prevent that? Well, what you can, a very common way to do that is to basically check to see if there's data in one of your measures before you actually retrieve and perform the calculation. So in this case, we're using a numeric function, the if statement, or it's called a conditional if, IIF, and we're going to use that, first of all, to check to see if there's any data in my actual sales units measure that I'm using in my calculation. Or not, in this case, I'm not really using it in the calculation per se, I'm just displaying it. Excuse me. So basically, I'm just saying, okay, if there's no data for this measure, then go ahead and put in a null value. Otherwise, go ahead and show the product list, the list price. And down below, as you can see, I show you where you can find that if statement. And if you click on it under the numeric functions, if you click on that, you can see the original syntax of the if statement. And if you're logical, I mean, if you have any sense of logic, you can see that, clearly there's some Boolean logic going on here. You're checking a condition before you want to do anything, and then giving it a other or an else condition as well, which is basically what we're doing up here. If my sales is equal to 0, go ahead and fill that cell with a null. Else or otherwise, go ahead and show the list price because it's not null, obviously. So what is this going to do? Well, it's going to reduce the number of rows returned. It's only going to return items that have data for the actual sales category that I'm checking against. It's much more efficient. It's going to reduce your chances of having a runaway view. And so basically, this is a really good practice, and we see this a lot, where you use an if statement to kind of quantify the calculation before you actually do it. So what does this look like? It's much cleaner. As you can see, I've got only 102 rows that I'm retrieving in this case, and as you can see, the data looks great. It's much more uniform. I've got the list price there identified. It's a little redundant. Of course, I can go ahead and hide that list price if I wanted to next to my product, because I can actually drag and drop my calculation anywhere I want. So this is going to help tremendously with prevention of the runaway view. This is a very common calculation that might cause those types of issues. Another common calculation that might cause some issues is the ranking calculation. So many times you might want to use a rank to rank your customers or your items and base that on your sales data. So in this case, I'm using my rank function, and I'm using that to basically rank my customers against the sales dollars for the month of September, which is my current month of the demo data. It looks a little intimidating at first, but once you break it down, it's not too bad. And here below, I'm just showing you the rank syntax that we're using for this particular calculation. So in this case, again, I'm using the same tactic. I'm going to use that conditional if statement to quantify whether there's data existing in a certain measure before I actually go ahead and perform the calculation. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, if this measure that I'm using in that calculation, if that measure is equal to 0, again, I want to fill that cell with a null. Otherwise, go ahead and use the rank syntax to rank out my customers and use the actual sales to do that. So this would be the syntax that you can use to do that and to use that ranking calculation. As you can see in its raw form, I need to use the rank calculation with a tuple expression and then have a numeric expression in the mix as well. So in this case, I'm using my sold to, and then I'm also using the actual sales measure here, or yeah, basically actual sales for September. So that's what my rank is going to be based on. And by the way, some of this is in your examples. So notice a little hypertext up here in case you want to look up some of the syntax for yourself. You could actually click on the examples and it'll go through some of that. And I'll go ahead and show you that once we show a few examples of this. So what's this going to look like, the ranking? Well, on the left-hand side, you can see that I'm doing the rank without the if statement. Pretty ugly. Just completely irrelevant. and not working. Whereas the ranking on the right-hand side is actually using the syntax I just showed you, which has that if statement involved, so that it's really basically only ranking stuff that I have data for. And so in this case, as you can see, my ranking is such that it's showing me the rank for the customers for the different actual sales units and how they break out. It's an overall ranking in this case, so I can see Wilder Foods here, Eastern America coming in at number 1. Actually, no, it's by subtotal, so by division. So we've got the Good Foods here in Western coming in at number 1 for the, sorry about that, for the division of food service. So it does rank by, as you can see, within each division. So again, that if statement really bailed me out on this one. Otherwise, it would be a pretty ugly, meaningless, irrelevant calculation. Not to mention it might run forever. You may not even see the end result depending on what you're trying to do if you don't use that if statement. Again, with the count, you're now counting things. How many items am I selling, right? That could take a while, especially if you're doing it by customer or sold to or shipped to for that matter. So that would take a while. Be careful with this. Again, same tactic here. We want to quantify whether that measure we're using in the ranking or in the count function, does that measure have data in it? And if it does, then we want to go ahead and use it. Otherwise, we want to fill in the null. Okay. Here we can see we're just saying, okay, if my measure does not equal 0, go ahead and do the calculation. Otherwise, display a null. So it's a little backward in terms of the prior calculation we looked at, but nevertheless, it's the same concept, right? We just want to do this count calculation for that particular measure that has no data or has some data in it, right? We don't want to do it against the measures that have no data. So my count syntax, as you can see, I'm using this count syntax over here, and I'm using that exclude empty, so it only counts where data exists. And you might scratch your head, well, aren't we doing that because with the if statement? Yeah, we are, but you'll see in a minute what I'm talking about as to why we would need both in this example. On the left-hand side is without the if statement, and then on the right-hand side is with it. Again, very clean data on the right-hand side, more of what I want here. On the left-hand side, I can see rows that have 0 in my count calculation. I don't care to see that. I don't want to see that. That's what your if statement is going to do. So we look back at that if statement. It's imperative that we included that so that we get the result here on the right-hand side as opposed to the left-hand side. Okay, much cleaner. Your users will be happy, and it's relevant. I mean, you don't want to stick out a view that is just going to cause more questions than anything else. So we did what we could, right, to basically prevent runaway views as much as we possibly can. But you're going to still run into them from time to time, of course. Users will be users. So if that's the case, guess what? In viewer 7.1, you actually have a cancel button. So you have this cancel icon that will display while the view is cranking away. And so you could actually click on the cancel icon to stop running the view that is either actively opening or refreshing in your browser. And then when you do that, Stratum Viewer will stop trying to open or refresh the view. So in this case, it will release some resources there from the client, and your desktop won't be stuck trying to retrieve all of the data from your browser session. You will get a message, and it will display to confirm that the view has been canceled, and then you can go ahead and proceed on running whatever view that you want to run next. And again, when do you want to use this? Well, you run a view and you realize maybe you meant to run a different one, and this one's actually still running. Or maybe you accidentally click on show all for your rows, and now it's cranking away at invoice level or product and ship to level, and you've got 100,000 rows waiting to process. Well, now you can go ahead and cancel that and move on and move on to something else and do something smarter, um, and take control of your session. Another great tool here, part of 7.1, is the View Monitor menu. The View Monitoring menu will give you the ability to monitor any views that are currently running. So if you have views out there that have been running for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or longer, you can call your admin, and or the admin can take proactive action here and go in and monitor their views, and they can cancel the view themselves. So in essence, view administrators could monitor the viewer application on an as needed basis. In this viewing monitor menu, which is, by the way, part of viewer 7.1, like I said, it is accessed through the admin utilities, so only administrators would be able to actually get to this. In this menu, once I get to it, as you can see, I can refresh it so that I can see if the views are still running. And then I can select and cancel the view so that it's not running any longer. My display columns will give me a run time, so I know how long they've been running and when did they start running. So in this case, then I can take, again, active control and cancel any views that it might be running for a long time. Might, dragging the server to its knees on certain occasions here where, memory is being consumed, and it's, causing users to have latency in some of their viewer sessions. So this is something that you can prevent by, again, following some of these rules, using some of these best practices, and then upgrading to 7.1, which is basically what you want to do. All right. So how do you do that? Well, contact me and we can get the ball rolling. Okay, I can help you with the steps involved to get you upgraded. It's not a very difficult upgrade at all, and you can contact me directly and we can get you started, at least on a schedule, get something scheduled, and get you on the radar, and get you up to 7.1. And we've got a lot more other, other great things in 7.1 as well, such as the dashboarding, in addition to these things that we just discussed as well. Data import, you can now import data from an Excel spreadsheet. So a lot of really good things are part of 7.1. Here's the dashboard example we have right now. As you can see, you could string together the views that you have today, graphical, or maybe they might be data grids, but now you can string together the views to create your dashboard and publish it out as the home page, or you can publish it by user group. So this is, again, part of 7.1, is this ability to create these simple but effective dashboards with the views that you've already created. All right, let's take a quick look. We only have a few more minutes. I just want to take a quick look at what we discussed today. Here is my View Monitor menu. So again, this is accessed via the admin utilities. So it's not meant for users really to go in and do this. This is more of a administrative function, where if I click on the View Monitor, I don't have any running views right now, so that's a good thing. This is typically something you want to see here, where you don't have a lot of views here that are still running. That's a good sign. But if you did, they would actually show up here, and I would then have the options to go in and cancel the view if I wanted to. So again, this is part of the new 7.1 version. If we were to take a look at some of the views that I ran today, for instance, the product count. So now that's running. There's my cancel button. So as you can see, it's grinding a little bit now. And now it's returned. So if that was to continue to grind, again, I could just click on that cancel button, and it would then go ahead and release the session, and I can then move on much more elegantly than before. Here's my count. This view has a filter on sold to. I'm going to go ahead and just clear it out, and we're going to return all my rows here. And so now here is my calculation of number of products that I've sold to each one of my customers. If I sort this in descending fashion, here are my top customers: Wilder Foods, Quebec, Calgary, Raleigh. Great account, Wilder Foods. They're my top accounts in terms of the different products that they're purchasing from me. So as you can see, the count function is pretty effective. It can be very enlightening at these other levels, so you can rank customers based on how many products they're purchasing from you. And these are distinct products. So let's take a look at the calculation. If I double click on the calculation, we took a look at this early in the presentation. And again, there's my if statement, making sure that the sales measure is indeed not empty. And then I go ahead and do the calculation. Check out the documentation. I don't know if you know this or not, but you can actually use a /, 2 forward slashes to document the calculation. So here, as you can see, // check to make sure there's data. So I'm actually documenting the different areas of this calculation by using the // right? It's equivalent to like -- in SQL. You can then comment out what exactly the certain parts of the calculation are doing. And that's exactly what this calculation does. It's documenting, by using the / approach, documenting each section of this calculation so that the users understand what's going on. So if I was a user, I came in here, I could actually understand, each component of this calculation. So I highly recommend that. That's always a good practice. Here's my if statement. Again, if I were to get that out of here, for instance, let's simulate something where I'm not going to run the if statement at all. So now I'm just doing the count, and there it goes. And so now, again, there's the unwanted rows that I've got down at the bottom. 0 counts. They have no data associated to them. So I really don't care to see that. And that's where the if statement comes into play. This is going to clean up. And again, this is my environment. Your environment, you might have 40 to 50,000 sold tos or shipped tos, and you probably do. And this would crank. Trust me, it would run forever. So, use that if statement. You definitely want to use that tactic. It's very simple, but yet very effective. So that when I run this view again, it runs very snippy. As you can see, when it ran again, the cache is warm now, so it actually runs very quickly. Again, if I clear that filter out and I return all my customers, then it's very lickety-split, right? And that's what you want. You want to make sure that your views are crisp, that they run properly, and that you're not stuck, having to deal with any runaway views at all.